My name is Helena, and I've been walking with Jesus for about 30 years. And it's hard to sum up a 53-year journey in a few minutes, but I'm going to do my very best. Today, I am full of confidence. I'm full of joy. I am known for being fearless and just being a very confident woman of Christ. However, it was not always that way. Before I knew Jesus, I was probably the epitome of shame. I was the epitome of fear. I was so introverted that I was too afraid to do the most simple things like order food at a restaurant. Some of the reasons for that were I was born to parents that loved me very much. However, we were quite poor. And unfortunately, my mother was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and struggled with mental illness and did have to be hospitalized from the time I was 6 months old until about 3 years old. My dad struggled working at a shoe factory just to keep a roof over our heads and keep food on the table. I had quite a few babysitters that were patched together. Some were wonderful, some were not so wonderful. In this time, I just remember feeling a lot of fear and a lot of shame. And unfortunately, my view of Christianity was quite poor, and there were good reasons for that. One of my babysitters was my grandfather, a man who was very verbally and physically abusive to my father, but he was good to me. However, he was an atheist, and some of the things he said to me had a profound effect on me. He always told me that all religions were equal and were really just man's way of trying to be good in a pretty difficult world. He had agoraphobia, so he struggled with mental illness himself. He also taught me that Christianity was probably responsible for most of the bad things in the world, and I truly believe that. My interactions with Christians were not positive. When I was about 5 years old, I began to be sexually abused, and the person that had done this in my family was actually an ordained minister. And I just remember thinking it was an exclusive club full of judgmental people, a club that I didn't belong in, and I just struggled with my view of Christians. And a lot of times, some of the things that were said to me were very judgmental. I felt like I was soiled and damaged, and that I just could never be good enough to be part of that exclusive group, if God even existed. As the years went by, I realized that I myself was struggling with a condition that's called obsessive compulsive disorder. And my dad made it clear that if I was intelligent enough, I was not going to be struggling with a mental illness. And that if anything, my job was to stay very well balanced so that my mother wouldn't be affected by any of my own needs. So I suppressed my own fears, I suppressed all those things and just gritted my teeth and got through life. I was blessed to meet David, my husband, and we quickly got married. I became a very young mother, and about 5 years, when our son was about 5 years old, we had moved to Cedar Grove. And I quickly realized that in order to fit into the community, we were going to have to go to church. So I thought, cool. It just seemed like it could be a lot of fun. Like, they have potlucks, they have these little Bible studies. Don't know if God exists, he probably doesn't, but I think I can be good enough that I could fit in pretty good to this. But it quickly became clear to me that, man, it was not what I thought it was going to be. The pastor made it clear that it was important for us to really walk with walk with God, and I was not going to do that if he didn't exist. So I began to investigate to see if God was even real. God was so good to me, and he would answer these little prayers, these little, you know what, God, if you're real, do this. And he uses different ways to draw us to him, and he answered some pretty silly prayers. One Sunday, I can't remember what Sunday it was, but it was like a car that you added gasoline to, and I was filled with the Spirit. It wasn't even that great a sermon. It wasn't anything special about that Sunday, but I just lit on fire for him, and I just couldn't wait to tell everybody about him, and I probably became really obnoxious. You can ask David. I'm sure he would be happy to tell you. I was just so passionate. My parents quickly told me, though, to calm down and just not take it too serious, because being on fire for God could have been what they considered part of being a little off, a little mentally ill. So I just couldn't help it, though. I was on this sugar high, and I was so excited to be with Jesus and to jump into all the things, teach Sunday school, go to all these Bible studies, and just be with him. He was so good to me at this time. He would answer these silly little prayers. For example, one time when David and I were first married, and I was first a Christian, I lost $20 in the backyard, in the dark, in a huge pile of leaves, and $20 was a huge deal to us at that time. So I prayed. Lo and behold, David went outside. I'm not sure why God didn't call me to do it, but he called David to go outside. Within 5 minutes, David found the $20. Wow. It was just incredible. Throughout the course of years, though, I continued to struggle with obsessive compulsive disorder. I probably was still so introverted and would not have been able to even hold down a job. It all kind of came to a head when I was about 30 years old, and to my sadness and disappointment in God, he did not take my anxiety away. He didn't take my depression away. And I felt like I was so disappointed in him, and I was even more disappointed in myself. And I thought, if I was a good enough Christian, if I really believed these things, he would do it, just like he did all these other miracles for me, but he was not doing this for me. About that time, I went to counseling. I was so desperate. I can't even explain to you the mental torment that I was going through with my anxiety and my obsessive compulsive disorder, but it came to the point where I couldn't even leave the house without possibly have to return, because if something touched my face, I was so fearful of the contamination that I would have to return home and wash my face in a certain way to even feel right. Through the course of counseling, the counselor quickly recognized that I wasn't going to be helped with counseling alone, and medication was prescribed for me and really turned things around. I felt like a new person, and I realized that it wasn't that I was a bad Christian, and life was never going to be perfect, and it still isn't for me. But I was going to struggle with him. I was going to take God into every area of my life. The shame just dropped away. It was like the shackles dropped away. I became confident. I was just filled with an amazing peace and an amazing joy, and I began to walk with him in a new way. I went back to school and I did all these amazing things with him. But what's even more amazing is that he showed me a way to walk with him in a way that is authentic and in a way that is vulnerable and honest. And I learned that my authenticity my simple honesty and my simple vulnerability that I show and share with other Christians and those around me was the gift that I was given to give to the world. He gave me a heart, especially for those who struggle with mental illness, and he gave me a heart for those who have been disenfranchised and the marginalized, and he gave me what is a fearless voice when I follow him. And 53 years can be summed up in God is good all the time. And I just can't even put into words what it's like to journey with him. And now he's still teaching me so many things. Each day is a new adventure. But he's there, and he's there in the middle of every struggle, and he's there in some really dark times. And that's all I can say.
Oh my God, so good, you never